So another Patreon Q&A. Thank you again, Patreons, so much for your support. I want to thank also Pethset for donating his commercial collections to the monthly giveaways we do on Discord. So if you are a Patreon, come join us on Discord. We have a lovely community there. And monthly challenges with giveaways. If you are not a Patreon, come join us on Patreon for lots and lots of extra content, and also come join us then on Discord. Okay, let's start with the Q&A. So the first question is coming from Chip Sweet G, and basically this is a link. I will put, of course, the link also in the description to a video by Alessandro Cortini where he goes a bit through his setup for 9-inch nails, and there is one part 111 where he explains how he's doing a certain type of sound. And I tried to recreate something similar in VCV. The thing is that he's using, I believe, the Echophone and the Herbverb for make noise, which have by themselves lots and lots of character. You can hear it's quite a noisy sound. Of course, in software, most of the things will be cleaner, right? But there are a few ways we can add some character to things. So here I have a simple sequence. I have the 8 sequencer. For now it's doing nothing, but the dark energy is the voice, which is a bit sort of a complex voice like the one he's using. I believe he's using the DPO also for make noise. Right, so this is all there is to it, and then it starts adding delay, and again the delay he's using has lots and lots of characters. So I'm using here Supercell in looping delay mode, and I'm using the lower buffer size, which means that it adds this character, this bit of noise to the sound, right? So if I bring this in, right, this is already a bit with the delay. And now he's using again the Herbverb, which is a reverb with some modulation, right? So of course in VCV we will use plateau, right? So if I add the reverb, right, there is nothing special, but I have here the 8 sequencer is using also the René, I believe, also make noise to sequence the size of the reverb. So this is exactly what I'm doing here. Right, and you get this interesting effect. What I am doing here is I'm sending it, again, I believe because this is in software, I'm sending it first through a slew limiter just to smoothen out the edges, otherwise we get clicks. Right, if you can hear this, I'm converting this into something a bit smoother. And then again, just to add more character, I'm adding noise, pink noise in this case, in 2 spaces. So first of all, the wet amount, just a bit, right, not too much. And also the decay. Right, so it's just a bit noisy, I guess. Right, so this is without the delay and reverb. And now with. Right, and you can play, of course, with the different parameters here, but the main idea is adding Supercell for getting this nice delay effect, gritty, noisy effect, and then plateau for this reverb modulation. The next one is from Dan. I notice sometimes when you load a module in a video, it has a different default state than mine. Is this a custom default? And if so, do you have any of those in shareable form? I've noticed they often seem to be in a slightly more usable state. So yes, there is, since VCV2, there is a new feature in the right-click menu of, I believe, all of the modules. Under the preset menu, you can save as default. You can save states as default states, which means that when you load the module, they will load with this state. For example, the FM operator, if you don't have this, it will load with these initialized settings here on the left. Right, but on the right, this is how I have it set up whenever I load the module. So you can see, for example, the envelope is engaged, and also the envelope itself, envelope for the level, and also the level, the settings of the envelope itself are a bit different. The same, for example, with the ADSR from VCV. This is how it will load with the default state. I have it loaded like this, just because I found myself always tweaking to this state when I load the module. So I thought I will just save it as a default preset. Now, there are a few things about this. First of all, this is great because it can save you time. Especially if you are using modules in the same way, more or less. So you just load them in the state that you like, especially if it's more complicated modules. But it can also be a problem for someone like me or someone that is sharing ideas and video form, for example. So if I build a patch from scratch, if I make a patch from scratch video and I load a module, it will load differently with different settings than you will load it. So if you follow the video, things might work differently, especially if there are options also in the right-click menu. Right, sometimes there are options in the right-click menu that are also saved in this default state, and you don't see this on the screen. So this might also be a bit of a disadvantage when you use VCVRack to share ideas, especially from scratch and stuff like this, because things will work differently for other people. About sharing the presets, I have no idea how to do this. I try to look in the different folders and everything to look for the default presets. I have no idea where they are. If someone knows how to share the default states, this will be great. Let me know and I will happily share them. What I can do, if there is no solution for this, what I can do is I can save them as an external preset that then you can just load and then save it as default by yourself if you want or if not. So in any case, let me know what modules. I mean, I don't know if there is a folder with all the default presets, it will make it easier because then I can just share the whole folder. But if not, let me know what modules you use the most, and I will see if I have a different state for them, and if it will be helpful, I guess. But again, I have no idea how to do this. If anyone knows where the folder with all the default presets or where it's saved or what to share exactly, let me know, and I will be happy to share them. The next question is from Pattern Music, virtual versus hardware. I am wondering if you use a different general approach to creating a patch in hardware versus in VCVRack. Most of the techniques in your wonderful patching techniques and ideas, thank you, collection are applicable to hardware as well as software. Thank you. But in VCV, I have pretty much unlimited resources. In contrast, my Eurorack is pretty much fixed, and my Eurorack is full. I use a lot of multifunction and algorithmic modules like Volt, Freak, Expert Sleepers, Disting, and Ornament and Crime. They give me a great degree of flexibility, but there's only one of each. I'm finding I need a whole different approach to patching compared to VCV. It's fundamentally different in some ways. Any tips? Thanks. So yes, indeed. In my opinion, or in my experience, patching in VCVRack is much more intentional. I will think to myself, I want an envelope, I add an envelope. I want an LFO, I add an LFO. And in hardware, it's much more exploration-oriented, I guess, because exactly like you say, because it's a fixed system, you cannot just add another envelope and you have to deal basically with the limitations. So I think that VCV is much more, for me at least, it's much more intentional. The patching process itself is much more intentional with intent. And in hardware, it's much more, let's see how I can do this and that with what I have. I like this actually in hardware. This is why I like building fixed systems in VCVRack so much and experimenting with them. I think limitations are a doorway to creativity. For example, if you find yourself without a voice anymore in your hardware because you used all of the voices and you want another voice, you might look and think to yourself, okay, I have here an LFO I don't use, can I use it as a voice? I have here a sequencer I don't use, can I use this sequencer as a voice? I have here a delay module I don't use, can I use this delay module as a voice? Or I don't have a modulation source, but I have here an envelope follower. Can I use one of the voices with the envelope follower to try and create another modulation source? And you get all sorts of different ideas and results, much more in an experimental way. And I don't mean experimental as blips and bloops and noise and stuff like this, but all music is basically experimental. And you just experiment and you explore things and ideas. I like this very much. The only tip I can give you is embrace the limitations and try to use them to your advantage and create interesting sounds and interesting ideas. And this is basically a lot of the ideas that I discovered for the patching techniques and ideas document came from hardware, from the limitations, because you think to yourself, okay, I really wish I had an envelope follower, but I don't have a dedicated envelope follower. How can I use this and that as an envelope follower, and so on and so forth? So embrace the limitations. I think this is the only tip I can give you in this regard. Again, I'm enjoying this. I also enjoy patching in VCV. I think VCV is an amazing platform for experimenting with different things, because you can add all the modules you want. So if you want to think for yourself, okay, what can I do with 5 envelopes? You can try this and see how it works, right? Or with the 10, like the whole series I did with Platts, going model by model and experimenting it. I could not do this in hardware so much if I had just 1 or 2 Platts, and in VCV I could add 7, 10 or 11 Platts and just explore everything. So there are also advantages of things like VCV. I gave up quite quickly on the multi-function modules. Not the Volt Freak, because the Volt Freak is more or less contained as in filters, more or less filters, distortion, stuff like this. So it's more or less the same direction. But I had also a distinct and I gave up on it. Eventually, I never used it because it could do so many things. I could never decide what to do with it because of the nature of hardware being so limited, and what you see is what you get. At least for me, I really like this approach. So I just couldn't, I never used the distinct. So I gave up on it. Yes, but the only tip I can give you is embrace the limitation and use it in your advantage. The next one is from Golden Pyramid. Hi. Curious if you've heard this track. Scanner is such an interesting artist, indeed, and experiments with so much different equipment. It amazes me how deceptively simple and yet beautiful a track can be, at least to my senses. I think this track is made on electron instruments. Curious how you think the background sounds might be constructed. I hear the ARP or sequence, everything just seems to go so well together. Indeed, I will leave, of course, a link also to this video. Scanner is a huge inspiration, totally, such an amazing artist. So I tried to recreate some of, not really recreate, but to create something a bit similar. I'm lousy at this. I'm recreating or deconstructing other people's music. It's not my forte at all. But there is something that I noticed there. Really an amazing track. The whole album is quite nice. Something I noticed there that is quite an interesting approach, I think. So there are, as you say, there are sequences and arpeggiators. And there are 2 things. First of all, I think there's a lot of decoupling of pitch and triggers there. So there are pitch sequences that are running independently from trigger sequences. And I did this in this little patch here I will show you. And there's another thing I think that he did there. And that's, I don't know if it's the whole track or just a few elements from the track, but he ran it through some sort, either a sampler and played it backward, or a delay and played it backward. But it sounds like he took some elements from the track and then added it as another layer, but playing in reverse. And everything, as you say, everything connects so nicely there together. So first of all, decoupling triggers and pitch. So I have here, for example, kick all, right, as one voice. And I have one sequencer that is running for pitch and another sequencer that is running for triggers. So I decouple the triggers and the pitch, for example. Right, and of course this gets much more interesting if you have the sequences with different lengths. So for example, the pitch sequence with 5 steps and the trigger sequence with 8 or something like this. In this case, it's not so amazing, but just for this example. Right, so there is one sequence, then I'm using this sequence also to generate chords, and I arpeggiate these chords, and again, I decouple the pitch. In this case, the voice is the FM operator. I decouple the pitch from the triggers. Maybe that's a bit too loud. Right, so this is also quite interesting. There's another sequence here. I'm using the pitch from the bass voice, so from the lowest note. It's not necessarily the bass, but it's from the lowest note to create the bass sound. And again, I decoupled it from the triggers. So in this case, I have 6 steps for the triggers. Right, and then again, what I think this is what's going on there. Either is he recorded the whole track or a few elements from the track to a sampler or a looper or something and then played it back in reverse, or he sent it through a reverse delay. In this case, we have a new module, taps, which is, I believe, a multi-tap delay, and it has also a reverse output that will play the delay in reverse, which is also quite fun. So if I solo this, right, and I'm using 2 elements, so not the bass, I'm using 2 elements, the sequence and the arpeggiator. And they are playing back in reverse, and I believe this is like, right, it's adding another layer there to the sound. Right, so again, decoupling pitch and triggers, and using either a sampler, a looper, or a reverse delay to play some of the elements, or the whole track can be also use the whole track in reverse and add it as another layer. So the next one is from Feremis Sound. Hi, thank you for all the amazing knowledge you're passing on, and of course your beautiful music. Thank you, man, so much. Apologies for a non-musical question, but would you be willing to share your video setup for making modular videos? They just look so good and crisp. Thank you again. I'm especially interested in what kind of lights you're using, tripod setup, and camera lenses. I promise I won't tell anyone. Okay, so first of all, again, thank you. I really appreciate it. What am I using? Let's start with lights, because with lights, I seriously have no idea what I'm doing. If someone has any tips or something that useful to share about lighting and stuff like this, please share it in the comments, because I'm always having trouble with lighting everything. As you can see now, the video looks quite terrible. I'm using my webcam and there is almost no lights here. But what I am using most of the time is this here. I hope you can see this. This is like a soft light. It's a soft box, I believe it's called. I'm not necessarily quite happy with it, but this is all I have, and I have some small lights. I have LEDs also, which might cause all sorts of issues. Every time I record something, I'm experimenting with different lighting because nothing works. Sometimes it takes me like half an hour, and then I don't feel like recording anything anymore. I always try different things. So again, if someone in the comments can share in the comments some tips about lighting, this will be amazing. What I do use, let me show you my cameras. I have 2 cameras that I got recently. Before that, I also used just the webcam. But since I got them, I'm really pleased with them. It's really easy to create or to have nice looking videos. So I have 2 Sony, this one's here, 2 Sony Alpha 6000, I believe. Yes. So again, Sony Alpha 6000, they are exactly the same. I got one, I was happy with it, so I got another one. If it's working, then why not? And I have 2 different lenses. I have 2 of them are from a Sigma. I have the box here. 2 of them are Sigma lenses, the f1.4. One of them is a 16mm one, and the other is the 30mm one for more close-up shots and stuff like this, right? So the same camera, two lenses from Sigma, one 16mm, one 30mm. I would buy more cameras actually, also for stuff like this, for live streaming, when I go back live streaming once. Because I really like them. They work great. They are not so expensive like new cameras. They are not new anymore, I believe. And they work great. And I don't use tripods. I have the same, again, if it works, then why not? I have two of these here. This is a Manfrotto, made in Italy. Manfrotto arm, I believe, or table arm. It's like a clamp. I think you have to get the clamp separately. I'm not so sure anymore. But they are quite known. And you just put this on the table and you clamp it. And then you have this here. I hope you can see this, right? And when you open it, everything moves together. So you can adjust exactly just with one hand. You can adjust all of this arm. Now, it's not perfect. It's a bit too short. Maybe someone knows about this. And maybe there's an extension or something like that can be connected. I don't know. There are many things here that can be connected, I believe. Yeah, so maybe someone can help me with this, because I find them a bit short, so they're not long enough sometimes, especially if I'm using the 30mm lens. Sometimes it's not far away enough. But it works great. It's stable. It clamps on the table, so there is nothing on the floor interrupting. You don't kick anything by mistake. And it works great. So again, two of these here, the same cameras, Sony Alpha 6000, two Sigma lenses, one 16mm, one 30mm, and lights. I have no idea. Seriously, I always change and I always experiment. I find it never works for me. I don't know how it looks like eventually, or why it looks good enough. But yeah, that's it, I guess. The next one is from Kyle. I've been really interested in wavetables recently and was wondering if you could share some ideas of what to do with more complex wavetables beyond just modulating a basic scan through the table. I love the idea of having so many sounds available in one wave shape, but it can get pretty extreme with the scope of sounds pretty quickly, and I'm doing more than just a carefully modulated scan. So the thing is with wavetables, I think the best way to think of a wavetable is just of another way of changing timbre. You don't need to use them just for drones by slowly modulating morph. You can use them just like you use a filter or a wave folder, for example. But first of all, in this Eurorack, there are many options for wavetables. We have, for example, the XFX Wave from Blamsoft, of course, the Wavetable VCO from Surge. There is even a Wavetable VCO and a Wavetable LFO from VCV, Terraform, the Wavetabler from Sikocell, and there are more, so there's a lot to choose from in VCV. I'm going to stick with the Wavetable VCO. And again, the best way to think about this is just by thinking of it as another way of changing the timbre. So here I have, for example, a saw wave going through a low-pass filter, right? This is one way to change the timbre of a voice, or with a wave folder, right? Or with a wavetable. Right, so you can apply what you apply for filters and what you apply to wave shapers. You can also apply to wave tables, right? So here I have a sequence, right? Again with the wavetable VCO, right? You can change the morph, but you also have saturation. Maybe I will change this back to the wavetable format. Right, you have all sorts of different, other than scan, you have different ways of changing the timbre. And again, just like you do with the filter, for example, where you use an envelope to control the filter, you can use an envelope to control also the wavetable. So for example, the morph and let's say the format. Right, and you can have it really short or longer. Right, and like this, basically, change the timbre, add more character to the sound, especially if you add delay to this, right? Add more character to the sound, just like with when you are using a filter or a wave folder. Right, you can also sequence things. Here we have the slips module or modules. I have two of them from Aleph Beats. Right, let me see here. Right, so in this case, I'm also using an envelope for the filter, just like you would do with a normal subtractive chain, but I'm also using a sequence, right, to sequence the morph and the formants. And by that, again, change the sound, add more character to the sound, more variation, more movement. Right, so treat it just like any other way that you can create and morph your sounds. Right, I have here also another example. I have, and let me take this out for a second. I have a saw wave, right, with some modulation on the filter. Right, but then you can go ahead and add another layer with a wavetable, also with modulation. Listen to this. Right, so you add another layer with a wavetable, not necessarily using it as the only source, but also using it to add another layer to the sound. If you listen just to this is now just the wavetable. And then with the saw wave. Right, anyway, just to add more layers to the sound, and not using it as a sound source by itself, but I understand what you mean, because there are so many different wavetables, not only the sounds within a wavetable, but also different wavetables, what to choose. Just go with your ear. And again, treat it like any other way that you treat a timbre of a voice, if it's with a filter, with a folder, with distortion, and stuff like this, and use envelopes, use LFOs, use random signals, use sequencers to sequence things and see what happens. Another one from Kyle, basically, how do you see the future of software rack versus hardware with everything that's going on lately in VCV, like Surge XT with the modulation capabilities, mapping with the Sternmelder modules, Air Windows module giving access to an entire suite of VSTs. So it looks like VCV rack becomes much more of a software that is detached from hardware, from being a hardware emulation or Eurorack emulation. So basically how I see VCV or similar software going in the next 5-10 years compared to hardware Eurorack and Synth. So first of all, about hardware, I'm not so sure where it will go because of everything that's going on with the chip shortage and component shortage. It looks like it's still there and it's affecting many manufacturers and people out there. So I'm not so sure what will be the future of hardware Eurorack. It looks like it's still alive and very much kicking, but I have no idea. About VCV rack also, I'm not so sure that I know where it will go. I'm quite happy with what's happening. I mean, it's not like it's up to me or anything, but I enjoy the process, like having the patch master from MindMeld, where you can map things, create macro controllers, create whole interfaces. This is very much software. Things like GlassPane and Bridge from PathSet. You know, GlassPane, to have GlassPane as a Eurorack module, you will need a whole 7U case just for this, I believe, and lots of patch cables. So taking advantage of software like this, I think it's amazing. I love it. It's inspiring. And sometimes you take ideas from this also into hardware, which is great. I believe this cross-pollination, is this the right term? Cross-pollination between software and hardware. And also what I see also a lot, also recently, People are using, or developers are using VCVREC as a sort of a testing grounds for hardware modules, and I believe and I wish that we will see more of this in the future. Of course, there is Volt, already released several modules in hardware that were maybe born, if you will, in VCVREC. I believe also Proteus and Warp Core also exist in hardware forms. Of course, both of them are digital. Volt has also a few analog modules. But taking digital ideas, developing them in VCVREC, getting feedback from users, this is unbelievable. Imagine you get feedback and you change things in VCVREC, see how it works, and then you take this and you put this in hardware. This is amazing. I would love to see, for example, geodesics once as hardware modules, maybe once it will happen. But I believe this is also something we will see more and more, or I wish at least, people using VCVREC as testing grounds for hardware modules, for developing hardware modules. But I still think that VCVREC is very much a Eurorack emulation, especially with all the new additions lately, with Befaco still updating modules, Instruo still updating modules. ALM joined the game now. There is Doppler even. You know, I think that VCVREC is very much still a Eurorack emulation. And actually, it's even better than this because you have the choice to have more of a software-like environment, more hardware-like environment, or even a combination of both, which is quite amazing, especially now that it's available also as a plugin, that you can enjoy the limitations of hardware inside your projects in Ableton, Bitwig, Reaper, whatever, Cubase, whatever you use. Yes, so this is more or less what I think. Again, hardware is more tough to know with everything that's going on. But I really like what's happening lately in VCV land. The next one is from Marcus. I'm a big fan of Boards of Canada, especially their album Music Has the Right to Children. Very interesting textures and use of samples and reverbs and tapey warbles and many lo-fi things. Warm organs and keys, washed out drones, extreme compression, artifacts, analog machine noises. Love to pick up a few tips to get some of these colors out of VCVREC. So this is a great idea for a whole video, because there are many things you can try. A few things that I picked up here, or I picked out, never mind. So first of all is, to add this warbly sound, you can use smooth random signals into the FM of an oscillator, right? Here I have a simple chord progression. Right, it's very clean, but now I have here walk from Bog Audio, which I will send to the FM input of the oscillator. Now, if I use this too much, it will sound like this, right? Which is a lot, but if I add just a tiny bit, and I slow this a bit, right? So now there will be this drift. Right, I hope you can hear this. It's very subtle, but it's there. It's adding movement. It's adding a bit of warmness or analogness to the sound. Another thing you can do is use noise also to the FM of the oscillator and also to the filter. Right, so I have here the same progression. Right, and let's use, for example, pink noise again to the FM just a bit. If you add this too much, right, it's too much, so just a bit. It sounds like the crackle of a tape. Right, and then also to the filter. Right, very lo-fi-ish. Right, so this is another thing you can do. You can also use simpliciter in VCV to sample all sorts of different things. Here I have like strings. Right, and then you use the expander of simpliciter, you just put it on the right. Now it's connected. And now you have here wow. Right, it will basically also add FM. Right, and make this very lo-fi-ish. Right, so this is another thing you can do. And of course, you can also use something like the new Air Windows module that has lots and lots of lo-fi effects. Right, so if I do this, right, and I go to the lo-fi, let's go with Flutter. Right, which will add some lo-finess. There is also vibrato. So you can use also this module. It has lots and lots of different modes. It has also tape if you want to add some tape distortion. Right, so you can experiment also with the Air Windows module. And yes, this is a great idea for a whole video about this subject. The next one is from Nathan. I recently watched your video on generative patch basics and got a good result going, but as I add more voices and song structure, I'm starting to hit some hardware performance bottlenecks. What are some strategies and techniques to keep scaling generative patches? So yes, this can get quite complicated the more you add for generative patches, because it's easy when you patch generative stuff just to add more and more modules and more voices and more layers. And the only tip I can give you in this case is record textures, record loops. You can record long loops, also 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then load them as a sample. Remove the modules you used. For example, if you used like 5 modules to create a nice texture, remove those modules and then load it as a sample, as a loop, as a wave file, and right, with simpliciter, complex simpler. There is also the looper from Lilac where you can also save, export audio files. So if you save a loop with it, you can even just record wave files with the VCV record module and then load them into something like Seco Player. So just record loops that are more or less texture-like. It depends what kind of generative patch you're building. You can make this a short loop, you can make this a long loop or a sample, and then load them as a sample and remove all the other modules. Yes, and this will save you a lot of CPU. And also try to use more send effects rather than using, for example, a reverb for each voice, because reverbs and delays are usually heavy on CPU. So if you have them as send effects, so you use one reverb for all of the voices instead of multiple reverbs, and this can also save CPU. But again, sample things, record things, and then load them as a sample, play them back as a sample. There's nothing wrong with that. And then it will save you space and it will save you CPU that you can then load and use other modules or more modules and add different textures and different ideas. The next question is from Karsten, I guess. I'm looking for a solution to quantize generative notes melodies to specific chords. So first I generate a chord progression on a sequencer, then I generate random melodies from another sequencer like the Turing machine. These notes I want to route through a note filter quantizer that the generated notes melodies only play the notes values of the specific chords from the chord progression. I want to keep this as simple as possible. I think we had a look at something like this last Q&A, but I will show this again. What you can do is use Quantum from ML, and let me show you how. So I have here a chord progression, right? This is the sequencer, the note sequencer, sequencing the VCO, right? Nothing special. And I have here the Turing machine that will sequence another oscillator, right? And I want to have the notes, right, be quantized to the notes of the chords. So what you have to do is this. You use a Quantum from ML, which is a quantizer or a note filter, if you will. It has two important inputs in this case. It has the note input and the toggle input. So what you do, you use the note, the polyphonic note information from the chords you are using. This will go to the note input. And now with the toggle input, you tell Quantum when to activate them and deactivate them. Now, if you're using a chord, just like for this technique, in the right-click menu of Quantum, you have to change this to polygate mode. And then when you use a polyphonic gate from your sequencer, every time there is a chord or a change in chord, the notes on the quantizer will change as well. And let me show you this. I have here the gate output from JW. In this specific case, with this sequencer, with the note sequencer 16 from JW, this will output a trigger usually that is too short for Quantum. So what you need to do is use something like D-gate or the gates module from VCV to turn this into a longer gate. And this goes to the toggle input. You see what happens here? The chords are changing, and the notes on the quantizer, the filter, if you will, are also changing according to the chords. Again, you use Quantum from ML. Let me mute this just so it's clear. You use Quantum from ML. In the right-click menu, you change it to polygate mode, so it will work with polyphonic gates. The note information from the chords you want to use, you send to the note input. The polyphonic gates to the toggle input. You make sure that the gates are long enough because the notes will stay active as long as the gate is high. If the gate is short, the notes will deactivate again. If you need, use something like D-gate or the gates module from VCV to lengthen the gates, right? And that's it. And then you send the Turing machine or whatever sequencer you want through Quantum, and it will quantize the sequence according to the chord progression. I hope this is what you meant. Let me know if this works for you. That's it. The next one is from Marcus. Hi. Maybe it's a lack of music theory. I enjoy spending my spare time with VCVRack, and I have some understanding of the basics of synthetic sound generation, but I would never call myself a musician. Sometimes when I absorb your videos, I see that you take some modules and set some parameters before you even hear the voice, and then when you patch that into the mixer, it mostly sounds great. When I create a patch from scratch, it usually sounds like someone's head is in a bowl. But it's definitely not harmonic. Is there a trick that you immediately get the right settings so that it sounds good, or is it the result of the countless patches you've already created? Or do you have to stand at the crossroad at midnight on the next full moon and sell my soul to the devil? Okay, so first of all, I don't think about music theory. I don't think music theory is something you know or something you don't know. I don't think there is there's like a thing that's called music theory, and either you know it or you don't. There's no end to music theory. It's never ending. It's a process that is always on the go. You always learn something, just like with modular synthesis, just like with synthesis in general, synthesis in the modular environment. It's not something you know or don't know. So I think it's all, in most cases, the more you learn, the more tools you have in your toolbox, the more ways you have to make decisions, for example. Right, so if you enjoy sitting with VCVRack, if you enjoy patching, but you feel like when you do something that has something to do with harmony or something like this, then I think just spend a bit of time. You don't have to go to school for music harmony or anything. Just try and learn the basics, for example, and see where it takes you. I think, again, in most cases, not always. Sometimes sometimes things that you know put you in a sort of a box, and you're just stuck there. But in most cases, the more tools you have, the more decisions, or I don't want to say better decisions, but the decisions that you want, you can make things with intent, which is always a good thing. So this is first of all. Second of all, yes, I think it's mostly experience. When I set something, then probably I did it a few times before, and I more or less know the result that I will get. I mean, it's never the same. So it gives me a good starting point where I can start and then go from there. Because again, sometimes when you say something like this, that I already know what to do, to me it sounds like I'm always repeating myself, which is not necessarily a good thing. Sometimes it can be also a good thing. This is a good subject. Anyway, so I think if you enjoy it and if you have fun and if it's something that you enjoy doing, then maybe it's better also to spend some time practicing the things that you feel like you are weak in, for example, and you would like to know more, like more harmony and melodies and how you can use a quantizer in a way that suits you better. I'm trying to avoid words like good and better and stuff like this because it's not necessarily good, but yeah, so this is first, and then also experience. I think the blessing and the curse of VC-VRAC is that we have so many modules to experiment with. So you almost never use the same modules over and over again. So try and use the modules over and over again and find what you like about them. There are some modules that you will like one thing about them and you will not like different things, different aspects, and you will find yourself when you add them, already you know, okay, this is what I like, let's try this and let's go from there. Again, it's not necessarily a good thing, but yes, it's also experience. There is no magic trick, there is no workaround, there is no shortcut, I guess. Sorry. The next one is from FMRH, I guess. I'm asking you to take a look at a cool module. This time I'm thinking of Frozen Wasteland Portland Weather Delay. I know lately you've done some granular content and I'm loving it. I'd love to see what cool things you can come up with using this delay. So there is actually already a video all about this module. I will put a link in the description. I did already a video about it. It was quite a long time ago, but still it's you might find some interesting things. But basically it's a multi-tap delay where you have access to each of the taps and you can change different parameters. There's like panning, filters, the pitch, right, and stuff like this. I'm not so sure. Maybe it is granular. I don't know. Maybe it is granular. The only thing about it is that it's really heavy on the CPU. So if I activate the performance meter, you see without doing anything, it's quite up there. It's even higher than Plateau. Actually, Plateau is not so high anymore, which is cool, but it's quite up there. So it's a bit, yeah, it's quite heavy on the CPU, but it's great for sound design that you can create all sorts of things and record. Right, I have just a simple sound here. For example, I can change the time. Opalach. Let's see. Right, and you can hear the different taps. Right, so now, for example, I can pan different taps, so they will be panned left and right. Of course, everything is also modulatable. Right, if you're with headphones, you can hear this. I can change the pitch, right, of some of the, maybe the filtering, also like activating a low pass filter or sometimes a high pass filter or a band pass. Right? Right, and create all sorts of different texture. There is also like rhythms that you can use, for example, swing. Right, reverse. Right, so again, you can create all sorts of different effects. I recommend when you use it, record your results, and then remove the module because it's quite heavy and you will not be able to build bigger patches. But it's great for sound design. If you use it in a VST, for example, you could use it as an effects module. And again, go check out the video I did. It's an older one, but it can be quite fun still. The next question is coming from Kleinestein, I guess. Can you recommend how to set up a big patch to perform live with PatchMaster and a MIDI controller in a smart way? Which parameters do you tend to perform live? Complexity versus simplicity, trying to find a middle ground as too many control elements can end up in confusion and too few can be sound boring. Also, do you change musical harmonic structures live or do you use song mode like in Foundry for that? Okay, so let's start with the song mode with the harmonic structures. In the words of Trovarsi, I am song mode. This is what she says always. If you don't know Trovarsi, definitely check her out. Yes, so I am song mode. I like having control over when to transition. I like performing things live. I don't like to memorize when the transitions will be, I guess. I would like to perform them live. But I am using song mode as a sort of a compositional tool, as a sort of creating variation within one section. But I hardly use song mode also on other sequencers to automatically transition between songs or between sections and stuff like this. Yeah, so I like to perform things live. So maybe I will have a few different patterns or songs, but I will choose when to transform into them, more or less. Okay, and about the PatchMaster and controller, of course, it depends so much on your patch and what you have there and what kind of modules, what they have to offer. And more things like this. I have a whole video planned about transitions. Oh, let me turn the engine off here. A whole video planned about transitions and stuff like this. I should really start working on it. But there are a few ideas that you can try, some stuff that I like doing to create more interest, I guess, and transitioning from one place to another. So here I have a patch, I have drums, a bass and a melody. Right, and now what I like to do, here I have also PatchMaster with a few macro controllers set already that you can map to your controller, of course. So for example, transitioning with the drums, I like, especially with hi-hats, I like bringing up their decay, and while doing this, sending in them also into a delay that will continue ringing after I close the decay also. So I do this, I send a copy to a VCA, and then from a VCA this goes to the delay to another channel, and I have here a macro controller that has a few mappings to the decay of the hi-hat, also to the clap, just to add more intensity, and also to the VCA, so it will open the VCA, will send this to the delay, it will sound like this. Right, and then when I close the delay, when I close the VCA, the delay will keep on ringing out or will decay slowly. Right, this is great for performative tools that you can perform live. With the bass, also the same, depends what modules you use. In this case, I use the percussive vibration, so you have the FM depth mapped. And when I bring up the FM, also the wet amount of a reverb will open, so this will send this also to a reverb and it will sound like this. So for example, I can take the kick out and do this. With the reverb. And like this and so on and so forth as a sort of a performative tool. Again, it depends what modules you use. In this case, the percussive vibration has this great FM that sounds great. And again, I'm sending it to a reverb on purpose so I can open the wet and create a wider sound. Another thing I like doing, again with the delays, is send the melody or some sort of percussive element to a delay. then freeze the delay and slowly close a filter, again to add a sort of a transition type of sound. So again, if I close here some of the sounds, I can freeze the delay and then start slowly to close the filter. Right, and it's still there, and we moved into a different section of the song, if you will. Right, so this is also something that I like doing. I like using delays and filters and reverbs as a sort of a transitioning tool. Again, I have a whole list of things I want to show in this video. I just have to start working on it. But it will also depends on your patch and the modules you use. What I recommend, go module by module, try and tweak things, see what you find interesting, and then map them. And try to remember what is doing what. And again, for this, you have the MindMeld Patch Master, which is great for microcontrollers and stuff like this. The next one is from Etienne. Hi, Etienne. First, thank you for all your work. Thank you so much for your support. The amount of information, examples, videos, and little gifts like you did with the lovely interface for NanoControl is just insane. Thank you. I appreciate it. I've noticed that you recently released more hardware live performance like To Conquer Grief that is so moving. Thank you. And did you consider doing breakdowns of those patches? Personally, even if I don't have any hardware, I find very interesting to listen to you talk about your patches and ideas. Hope that you will consider it. Once more, thank you for all. Once again, thank you for your support. Yes, so I have a whole new channel. If you don't know about this still, I have a new channel. It's called Modular Fun Guy. What a surprise! And it's dedicated just to music and sounds with my hardware setup. So if you're interested, go subscribe. Go check it out. I will put a link in the description, of course. And yes, I did already. If you have a look at the patch breakdowns tab on Patreon, there are also patch breakdowns with hardware that I went through the patch and the performance and how I performed things and why. The thing is, I would love to make more. I would love to make this for every patch I do. But the setup, I have to change the setup. So for example, sometimes I will record something and the cameras are in one place. And I don't know if the performance was, that if I can change things, that the performance was good enough, because I don't listen to it directly. I wait a bit and then I listen to it, and then sometimes I will record it again. So if I change things, the patch will lose itself. Also, the cameras are set in a certain way. I have to change how the cameras look. Sometimes I have a bigger setup, a smaller setup. I have to change things. I have to get the mic over there. I don't have the mic. So it's like I'm recording, I'm concentrating on the music, and then I have to switch directly and concentrate on recording myself speaking about the patch. It's doable. I'm not saying it's not doable, but it's the workflow is a bit, it's not comfortable enough for me to do this. I should get another mic for that table. If I could just like switch a button and then I could just speak about the patch, that would be great. But I have to change the angles of the cameras and see that everything is working, and take the microphone there and then involve the second computer to record everything. Because usually when I make music, I have just the laptop on, so I don't have any distractions. Sometimes I will work on music not late at night, but in the evening, for example. And then I record it. And then I have to start recording, it's already late. I have to start recording the patch breakdown. So I have to figure out a workflow that it will work for me and it will be easier. When it's easier to record, then I will definitely make it. There are a few there already if you are interested. But I'm definitely considering upgrading my setup there so I can also record voice easier, I guess. The next one is from Dan. Hi Dan, I recently changed my setup and it has gotten a little more complicated. I used to just have a computer and audio interface and speakers and headphones. I recently got a mono nose which is basically another little computer. It has its own inputs and outputs. So now I might want to route audio from Norns into my main computer, or from my main computer into Norns, and from there to my speakers and headphones. And I like to do all of this with the minimum patching. I have nothing against patching, but I don't have a lot of space to work with. Basically, I'd like something like intermix in hardware where I can press buttons to route signals from inputs, which could include one of two computers, to one of two computers, and from there to speakers, headphones. Is there something like this in hardware? So there is something that is not completely new, but it's quite new from Erica, since this matrix mixer, you have 16 inputs, 16 outputs. Maybe it's a bit of an overkill for what you have now, but if your setup gets even more complicated, this can work well. And you have a digital interface that you can just, with buttons, instead of patching and repatching, just with buttons, you go and you change the patch. You can save also presets. So you have different presets and just change the routings like this. Of course, this can get also quite creative with all sorts of feedback patching and stuff like this, but it can work also really nicely for the studio. So you have 16 inputs, 16 outputs that you can route in different ways. And you just, with the click of a button, you can load presets, save presets, and just route things to where you want. What I do, I don't have this. Oh, this is not what I wanted. This is what I wanted. I don't have this matrix mixer. I don't have any experience with it. I also don't have a patch bay or anything. I have a few hardware things, a few hardware synths and hardware equipment here. For example, I have the Neutron. I have the Electron Analog Hit Mark II. I have a compressor here, an analog hardware compressor that I use. And what I do basically, they are all connected to my audio interface. So I have the Motu Ultralight Mark IV. Right, so they are all connected, and then inside the DAW in Reaper, basically I can just choose the connection. So I don't have to patch or repatch or anything, but in Reaper I can just choose what goes where. So for example, I can route the Neutron to the analog hit, or what I do usually is the Neutron to Reaper, add reverb, from there to the analog hit for distortion, some compression, and then back into Reaper, without patching or anything. So this depends on the audio interface you have. But if you have a few inputs and outputs already, then you can do this inside of your computer and just route things. But again, this solution looks really cool. It looks quite amazing, especially because you can save presets and stuff like this and load them quickly. Yes, so maybe this will be helpful. The next question is from John. I haven't been around long and I'm really missing to build another patch. I watch your videos and build them. It works very well and I'm learning a lot. But when I invent a patch on my own, then I really miss it, something good to do. My question is, maybe you have a few tips for beginners on what to look out for when building. What are you looking at? How do you start? Does it depend on the module? Do you let yourself be guided by modules, or do you already have a musical idea in mind before you start? Maybe you have some tips. And again, thank you for being there. Thank you so much for your support. Okay, already I will say, when I sit down without any idea in mind, nothing comes out of it. If I just sit down and I have no clue, usually nothing will come out of it, which is also okay. And it's great for practicing maybe sometimes, but usually what I will do, I will have something in mind that I know how I want to start. Now, this can be many things. This can be a module I want to explore. If it's a new sequencer, if it's a new effects module, if it's a new oscillator, every day something new is released. So if it's a specific module, if it's a specific technique, for example, if today I want to explore FM, or if I want to explore some sort of different technique. Or it can be also an idea of how to start. For example, today, okay, I want to use drums. Or now I want to create something more in the direction of a drone, or something more in the direction of techno, or something more in the direction of just noise. Or I want to work on sound design with this and this idea in mind. Always, always, always. Also, when I compose, I try never to sit down without an idea, because I know that nothing will come out of it and I will just get frustrated and I will stop and it's not fun. So always I try to have something to start with. Now, I really recommend starting with a module, for example. Pick a sequencer and say, okay, I will work now with the sequencer. Let's see where it takes me. Concentrate on this sequencer. Or a technique. Again, let's say that you want to sit down and explore FM. Then sit down and explore FM, and this you will have a start. And hopefully, if things go well, the modules and the sound will carry you on and will take you to different places. But just this first step, at least for me, this is how it works for me. We all have different workflows, but for me, I need this first step. I need this first initial. Also, if you remember when I live streamed back in the day, it was always around something. It was always around a module or always around an idea, because then I knew how to start. If I would just sit there and I would say, okay, I don't know where to start, let's see, usually nothing will come out of it. So yes, always have, again, maybe something else will work for your workflow, but for me it works when I have something in mind. Usually it's a module or a technique that I want to explore. Yes, so sit down, pick a module, never mind if you want a sequencer, if you want an oscillator, if you want some effects or something, and try to explore it in all sorts of different ways. And I hope you will be surprised that all of a sudden, before you know it, you have a patch going on. And hopefully you also enjoy the process, because the process is what it's all about. The end patch doesn't matter. It's the process until there, I guess. Yes, so try and concentrate on one thing. If it's a module, if it's a technique, if it's an idea, if it's a musical direction, if it's a genre. And I hope this will help you. The next one is from Marcus, another Marcus. I'm interested in making Buchla-like sounds in VCV2 Pro. Any cool ways to use Nischi dual pulsar together with a phaser or a delay to get Buchla-like timbres? So yes, I made a quick tip video about this exactly. I will put again a link in the description, but you can definitely do this. You have VCV Pro, so you have also the phaser from VCV, which is great for Buchla-like sounds. So here, for example, I have the dual pulsar. If I put this in self oscillation, right, it will just output triggers in this case that I'm just going to send to the input of the phaser. Right, and then the trick is to bring up the feedback. Now, in this case, on this phaser, feedback is called resonance, which is basically the same thing. Listen to this. Or negative. Oh. Right, and then you have the frequency. You can even add some stereo depth with the modulation. Right? So you basically ping the phaser, and you have even a volt per octave input that you can use, for example, to sequence. Right? And the resonance will be the decay time, so you can also sequence the decay time, right? Right, something like this, which is quite cool, and you can choose between 6 or 12 stage. It will give you a different sound. Right, so this is one thing you can try with the phaser from VCV, but also with the phaser from Surge, this will work quite nicely. So if again I put this in self-oscillation, again you have to make sure to raise the feedback. Right, now something that the phaser from Surge has and the phaser from VCV doesn't have is a mix control. So here, right, this is 100% dry. You hear the triggers, you hear the clicks, but I can take this also to 100% wet, which means that the clicks are gone. If I go back to the phaser from VCV, right, here you don't have wet control, so the clicks are always there. Right? It's not necessarily so bad, but just something to keep in mind, right? But here also we have a few more controls. By the way, I'm using the source of uncertainty module, also Nischi, also Buchla inspired. Right, you can change here between two stages or go all the way up to 16, which will give you again a different sound. You have a built-in tone control, which is a sort of a filter. Right, you also have different modulation. Yes, so you can get quite interesting sounds from pinging phasers, definitely with the dual pulsar, with other sequencers, with other trigger sources, if you will, and if you want, and get really Buchla-like sounds. The last question is coming from Free of Genre. Hi. I was wondering what your thoughts are on the Make Noise semi-modular trio of O-Coast, O-Control, and Strega. As a follow-up question, I was wondering if you would be interested in showing a few patch examples with only these three pieces of gear. So I have the O-Coast for quite a long time, a few years now already. I love it. I love its envelope. I love its sound. Then I got the Strega and O-Control recently. I love Strega. I love how it sounds. It's so amazing. It has so much character. And the O-Control is an interesting sequencer, but I hardly use it by itself. I mean, I love it, but only when I use it with other modules, specifically a quantizer. I have a hard time sequencing things without having them in scale. I know it's my problem, it's my issue, but this is how it is. So I usually use the O-Control together with the quantizer. So I don't think that I will ever use just those three without anything else, unless I go with a tuner and I start tweaking each and every step. Although I think then the O-Control is kind of losing its magic because it's all about performing with it and tweaking it live. So using it with a quantizer is quite fun. And again, it's a great sequencer for live performances, for live tweaking, for playing with it live and tweaking it and all sorts of things. Actually, I just did a couple of videos for Perfect Circuit about the O-Control and Eurorack. If you're interested, there's a link in the description. So yes, I think that those three, the dark easel, as we call them, I call them, I don't know. The dark easel, the Make Noise dark easel, the O-Coast, O-Control, and Strega, I think they are amazing tools. I think they work amazingly together. But I don't think that they are enough just by their own. First of all, you will need some more effects, I guess. I mean, the Strega has a delay, but it's more of a sound design delay rather than a delay, if you know what I mean. They work really well with the Morphogene and the Mimeophone. So if you have like a small case with those two, they are quite fun also for looping and stuff like this. And then it frees up the O-Control for more live improvisation. And also, I don't know, and also a quantizer for the O-Control. For me, I know it's my problem, it's my issue, it's my loss. But my ears are just too used to hearing things in scale, or in Western scales at least. And I know it's a shame, but this is how things are. So usually I will use the O-Control also with a quantizer, unless I have a different sequencer that I use for pitch, and I use the O-Control for modulations and sequencing all sorts of different things, which can also be quite interesting. But just by themselves, O-Coast, O-Control, and Strega, maybe for sound design they are great, but I don't think that I would be able to compose something just with those three, without a reverb, without a quantizer, without some sort of looping capabilities, that I can record something and mangle it and stuff like this. Yeah, so I made a video about the O-Control and Eurorack. If you are interested, links in the description. I would love to make more videos about hardware. I just don't know where to share them. I think my main channel is not the right place for it because it's mostly VCV rack. So I'm not so sure what to do with this, but I will have to see. Yes, and that's it. Okay, thank you again, Patreons, for your support. Thank you for the questions. Thank you again, PathSet, for donating your commercial collections to the monthly giveaways. Again, if you are a Patreon, come join us on Discord. If you are not a Patreon, come join us on Patreon and on Discord. Thank you again for watching. Cheers.